Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into something that's probably sitting on your kitchen table right now, salt. But we're not talking about sprinkling it on your fries. We're talking about salt as a symbol of something much, much deeper, something divine. Now, if you've ever wondered why salt is mentioned in the Bible, or how it could possibly be considered a spiritual weapon, stick around because this is going to blow your mind. So, let's take a trip back in time to the Old Testament, specifically to the book of Leviticus. I know, Leviticus might not be your go-to for bedtime reading, but hang with me here. In Leviticus 2 verse 13, God gives a pretty specific instruction: season all your grain offerings with salt. Do not leave the salt of the covenant of your God out of your grain offerings, add salt to all your offerings. Okay, hold up, did God just say covenant of salt? Yes, he did. And what's wild is that this isn't just a random seasoning choice. Salt, in ancient times, was a big deal. It wasn't just about flavor, it was about preservation. Salt had the power to keep things from decaying, which made it invaluable. And in the context of the Bible, it wasn't just about keeping meat from going bad. Salt symbolized something eternal, something that wouldn't break down over time, a covenant. Let's break it down a little more. A covenant is a sacred agreement, a divine promise between God and his people. It's like the ultimate contract, and the fact that God chose salt to symbolize this covenant is no small thing. Salt was used in sacrifices as a way to show that this covenant was unbreakable, enduring, and pure, just like salt itself. It wasn't going to fade or spoil, it was meant to last forever. And here's where it gets even more interesting. In Numbers 18:19, God says, "Whatever is set aside from the holy offerings the Israelites present to the Lord I give to you and your sons and daughters as your perpetual share." It is an everlasting covenant of salt before the Lord for both you and your offspring. Did you catch that? An everlasting covenant of salt. God is literally saying that this agreement, symbolized by salt, is meant to last forever, not just for the people back then, but for all generations. So, why salt? Why not gold or some other valuable resource? Well, unlike gold, which can be melted down, or silver, which can tarnish, salt is stable. It's consistent. And when it's pure, it doesn't change. It's a perfect metaphor for God's promises, unchanging, enduring, and trustworthy. But here's the kicker: this isn't just some ancient tradition that's lost its relevance. The concept of a covenant of salt actually has profound implications for us today. Think about it: if God's covenant is like salt, that means his promises to us are preserved, unspoiled, and eternal. In a world where so much is uncertain and fleeting, this idea of an everlasting, unbreakable covenant is incredibly reassuring. It reminds us that God's promises are something we can depend on, no matter what. And let's not forget the practical side of this. Back in the day, salt was a valuable commodity. Wars were fought over it, people were paid in it. Ever heard the word a salary? It comes from sal, the Latin word for salt. So, when God uses salt as a symbol, he's not just picking something random, he's choosing something that everyone at the time would have understood as valuable and essential. We're diving into one of the most intense and dramatic stories in the Bible, Sodom and Gomorrah. And trust me, you'll never look at salt the same way again. Alright, let's set the scene. We're in the book of Genesis, chapter 19. This is where things get real. Sodom and Gomorrah were these two cities that were, let's just say, not known for their good behavior. We're talking about places that were so corrupt, so morally decayed, that God decided it was time to wipe them off the map. But here's where it gets interesting. He sends two angels to warn Lot, the one righteous man in the city, and tells him to get his family out before the destruction begins. So, picture this: Lot, his wife, and their daughters are literally running for their lives. They're fleeing the city, and the angels give them one very specific instruction: don't look back. Seems simple enough, right? But here's where things take a dark turn. Lot's wife, for reasons we can only speculate, turns back to look at the city. And bam, she's turned into a pillar of salt. Now, why salt? Out of all the things she could have turned into, why did the Bible specifically mention salt? This isn't just a random detail, it's packed with symbolism. Salt, in this context, represents judgment. It's like a final, irreversible consequence. When Lot's wife disobeyed that divine command, she wasn't just looking back at a city, she was looking back at sin, at corruption, at everything God was destroying. And in that moment, she was judged. Let's dig a little deeper here. Turning into a pillar of salt wasn't just about punishment, it was a physical manifestation of what happens when you cling to the past, to sin, and to disobedience. Salt, as we discussed before, is a preservative. It keeps things from decaying. So, in a way, Lot's wife became a preserved reminder of what happens when you choose to disobey God's command. It's like she was frozen in time, a lasting monument to the consequences of looking back. But there's more to this story. Salt isn't just a symbol of judgment, it's also a purifier. Think about how we use salt today to cleanse, to heal wounds, to purify. In ancient times, salt was used in rituals to purify and protect against evil. So when Lot's wife turned into salt, it wasn't just about judgment, it was also about purification. God was purging the sin, cleansing the land, and making sure that what remained was pure and untainted by the past. This idea of salt as both a purifier and a symbol of judgment is echoed throughout the Bible. It's like a double-edged sword, it can preserve and protect, but it can also judge and destroy. And in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, we see both sides of this coin. The cities were destroyed, wiped out by fire and brimstone, but Lot's wife, she became a symbol, preserved in salt as a reminder of what happens when you disobey divine law. And here's where it all ties together. Remember how we talked about salt as a covenant in our last video? Well, this story is the flip side of that. While salt in the covenant symbolizes God's eternal promise and purity, in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, it symbolizes what happens when that covenant is broken. It's a reminder that God's judgment is just as real as His promises, and that salt can preserve not just life, but also the consequences of our actions. So, as you can see, salt isn't just a passive element in these stories, it's active, it's powerful, and it's deeply symbolic. Whether it's preserving a covenant or standing as a monument to judgment, salt in the Bible is way more than just a seasoning. It's a spiritual force, a symbol that carries weight and meaning that transcends time. Salt has been used for thousands of years, not just in cooking, but in rituals that go way beyond the kitchen. We're talking about salt as a tool for protection, purification, and even exorcism. Yes, you heard that right, exorcism. This stuff isn't just about making your food taste better, it's been believed to have the power to cleanse and protect against the forces of evil. Let's start with the idea of protection. In ancient times, salt was thought to create a barrier against anything unholy. It's like an ancient security system, warding off evil spirits and negative energy. In fact, it wasn't uncommon for people to sprinkle salt around their homes, especially around doorways and windows, to keep out unwanted spirits. They believed that salt could stop evil in its tracks, forming an invisible line that no dark force could cross. This wasn't just superstition. The idea has roots in ancient texts and practices. Take the story of Elisha in 2 Kings 2 verses 19 to 22, for example. The people of Jericho came to Elisha complaining that their water was bad and the land was unproductive. What did Elisha do? He threw salt into the spring and said, "This is what the Lord says, I have healed this water. Never again will it cause death or make the land unproductive." And just like that, the water was purified. The salt wasn't just a random ingredient, it was a symbol of God's power to cleanse and protect. Moving on to exorcism, this is where things get really intense. In various religious traditions, salt has been used as a key element in rituals to expel demons and cleanse spaces of evil spirits. The logic is pretty straightforward. If salt can purify and protect, why wouldn't it work to drive out what's unholy? Salt was often mixed with water to create holy water, a staple in exorcisms and blessings. The salt water would be sprinkled around to purify the area and drive out any lingering evil spirits. It's like the spiritual equivalent of disinfectant, cleansing the space and leaving no room for anything dark to linger. The connection between salt and spiritual warfare is fascinating because it's not just about the physical properties of salt. Sure, salt preserves and purifies, but in these rituals, it becomes something much more, a weapon against the unseen forces of evil. It's a reminder that in spiritual matters, even the most common, everyday items can take on profound meaning. And it's not just in the past. Even today, you'll find people who still use salt for spiritual protection. Whether it's a pinch of salt in the corners of a room, a line of salt across a threshold, or even carrying a small pouch of salt for protection, these practices have endured. They've been passed down through generations, a testament to the enduring belief in the power of salt. This ties directly into our previous discussions about salt in the Bible. Just as salt was a symbol of an unbreakable covenant and a tool of divine judgment, here it's a symbol of spiritual power and protection. It's like the thread that connects all these ideas, whether in a covenant, in judgment, or in battle against evil. Salt remains a potent, powerful symbol. Jesus called his followers the salt of the earth in Matthew 5 verse 13. And at first glance, it might seem like a simple metaphor. But there's a depth to this statement that's worth exploring. When Jesus referred to his disciples as the salt of the earth, he wasn't just giving them a catchy nickname. He was challenging them to embody the essential qualities of salt, qualities that are crucial for a life of faith and purpose. Salt has this amazing ability to influence whatever it touches. Just a pinch can change the flavor of an entire dish, transforming something bland into something full of life. In the same way, Jesus was telling his followers that they have the power to influence the world around them. They were meant to be that small but powerful presence that brings out the best in the world, to add value, and to make life more meaningful. It's a call to action, to be active, to make a difference, to prevent moral decay in society just as salt prevents physical decay. But there's a twist to this metaphor. Jesus didn't just stop at calling them the salt of the earth. He added a warning, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything, except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. This is where things get real. Salt, in its pure form, doesn't lose its flavor. But if it becomes contaminated, if it's mixed with other substances, it can lose its potency. For believers, this is a powerful reminder to stay true to their purpose, to remain pure in their intentions and actions. If they allow themselves to be diluted by the world, by compromise, by distractions, they risk losing their effectiveness, their ability to make a positive impact. Jesus was challenging his disciples, and by extension, all of us, to maintain our saltiness, to keep our spiritual integrity intact, no matter what. This idea ties beautifully into the previous discussions about salt as a covenant, as judgment, and as a tool for spiritual warfare. Just as salt was essential in those contexts, it's essential in the lives of believers. It's not just about what we believe, but about how we live out those beliefs in the world. Are we preserving goodness? Are we adding flavor to life? Are we standing firm in our convictions, even when it's tough? Being the salt of the earth is about being an agent of change, about bringing light into dark places, about being a force for good in a world that desperately needs it. It's about living in such a way that others can see the difference, feel the difference, and be inspired to seek out that same source of light and life. And here's the thing, this isn't just a one-time challenge. It's a daily commitment. Every day, we have the opportunity to be the salt of the earth, to make a difference, to preserve what's good and true, and to influence the world in a way that brings glory to God. It's a high calling, but it's also a privilege. And it's something that each of us can do, in our own unique way, no matter where we are or what we do. Thank you so much for sticking with us through this deep dive into the hidden truths about salt in the Bible. If you found this video enlightening, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Your support means the world to us. God bless you all, and may we all strive to be the salt of the earth in everything we do.